Hello, this is David Gottfried, and I want to talk about MSNBC and how it subverts the left. MSNBC has a reputation of being liberal. Ergo, many liberals listen to it. When they listen to it, they get a steady diet of neoliberalism, the liberalism of Hillary Clinton and Michael Bloomberg, the sort of liberalism that rules California, where homelessness is running rampant, even among educated people, because housing prices have reached the stratosphere. Now, Chris Mathews is one of the most contemptible newscasters on that godforsaken station. He fancies himself an historian of the Democratic Party because he once worked for some hacks on Capitol Hill. Generally, he tries to tell his audience that his historical knowledge has taught him that the Democratic Party must steer clear of the left and people like Bernie Sanders. Shortly after the 2020 presidential primary in New Hampshire, he treated his listeners to one of his characteristically plebeian, grammatically mauled monologues about the allegedly great Democratic Party, taking pains to stress that Bernie Sanders was a leftist aberration who must be shunned. He said that good and true Democrats were not envious of the rich, that working class Democrats don't know how the rich live and are not interested in impinging on the privileges of the rich, that the Democratic Party is only interested in securing the safety net and achieving gradual incremental change, and that fundamental changes to economic policy are shunned by good and traditional Democrats, the sort of peons he wants us to be. Mathews, very simply, is lying about the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders, far from being extreme, is not as much of a leftist as Franklin Delano Roosevelt was. For example, FDR embraced the Marxian message of class war. At a pre-election rally in 1936 in New York's Madison Square Garden, FDR said that the super-rich hated him. And he said, "I welcome their hatred." He did not talk of going across the aisle to play patsy cake with Republicans. He did not give us a mushy speech about bipartisan politics. He embraced battle. I repeat, he said, "I welcome their hatred." His words were an elixir for the poor and the working class. The crowd in Madison Square Garden was exhilarated by his vibrant and harsh language. And a couple of weeks later, he won every state in the Union, with the exception of Maine and Vermont. Similarly, FDR's economic policies were staunchly to the left of what Bernie Sanders has proposed. For example, some people in his administration proposed a tax of 100% on all income over $10,000 a year. They did not see why anyone needed more than $10,000 a year. I am not saying I agree with such a steep tax. I cite it to demonstrate that FDR was further to the left than Bernie Sanders. Also, his successor, Harry Truman, surged ahead of his Republican opponent, who had widely been expected to win. Harry Truman did this by campaigning with the message of leftist outrage that connoted the hellfire and damnation of many a Christian minister. He did not merely find fault with the super rich. He called them bloodsuckers and gluttons of privilege. Similarly, when Ted Kennedy challenged Jimmy Carter in the Democratic primaries in 1980, his advisors told him that he had only one problem. He might be seen as too liberal. Accordingly, he muted his liberalism and sounded like mush. And what happened? He lost every primary, save the one in every early primary, save the one in his home state of Massachusetts. However, before the New York primary, he shifted gears. I distinctly recall reading in the New York Times on a Saturday, 1 or 2 weeks before the primary, that Kennedy had, in the words of the New York Times, reverted to a position of, and I quote, undiluted liberalism, having heard rhetoric that recalled the romantic liberalism of Robert Kennedy. New York went for Ted Kennedy with a margin of 18%, and almost every succeeding primary went for Ted Kennedy. But MSNBC always obscures the truth, whether it be political history or contemporary political issues. Rachel Maddow is another MSNBC talking head who strives to cripple progressives in the Democratic Party. Her message is dangerously potent because many people may tend to assume she is progressive because she is a short-haired, acerbic lesbian, and style and image very often muddle comprehension. I recall that on the eve of the 2016 convention, she said that Sanders supporters were being absurd for complaining about the Trans-Pacific Partnership because, she alleged, Clinton had rescinded her support of the trade proposal and now concurred with Sanders in opposing the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Of course, she omitted critical parts of the story, namely that Clinton delegates at the Platform Committee strenuously supported the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Like Hillary, she is a woman whose words cannot be trusted. So whenever MSNBC says anything, treat it with the utmost skepticism. Thank you. This has been David Gottfried. Goodbye.